Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of the team in our geriatric division, Modern Management of the Older Adult. We have 3 courses in our geriatric curriculum. We have our 2-day live course, and we actually have our last 2 MMOA lives of the year this weekend. Alex is heading over to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I am in St. Mary's, Georgia, hoping that tropical storm or potentially Hurricane Nicole doesn't derail us, but we look like we're good to go. We're kind of firing in all cylinders there. And then we're going to be done for our live course in 2022. But we have a ton of courses on the books for 2023. So if you are trying to catch us live, I guarantee you we're in your area of the country. If you sign up for our MMOA Digest, it's a bi-weekly research email that goes out about all things geriatrics. We have our courses broken down by region of where we are in the next 6 months. So encourage you to sign up for that. You can go to ptonice.com/resources if you are interested in kind of finding out where we are and getting all things OT, Geri PT into your inboxes. All right, so I posted about this yesterday, and I thought we would do a little bit of a deep dive today on the podcast about a new guideline that was released with respect to falls prevention. We know, if we have been in the geriatric space, that falls are a big deal in older adults. 1 in 3 individuals over the age of 65 fall each year. I really hate that statistic because I think that 1 in 3 people in general fall each year. But most of the time we just don't worry about it because we get up. And the reason why it becomes such a huge worry for our older adults is that the rate and incidence of serious injury as a consequence of a fall starts to go up fairly dramatically after the age of 65. So we start to see this exponential increase of years being lived with disability after the age of 65 as a consequence of a traumatic or non-traumatic fall. And so we have seen those injury profiles, right? Head impacts, TBI, burns, orbital fractures, hip fractures, any other type of injury. You know, we've kind of seen, unfortunately, those falls that have occurred that have led to a significant and oftentimes permanent change in function. And so we have spent a lot of research dollars, a lot of healthcare dollars trying to figure out what is the best way for us to show up in order to impact this problem, because we know that there are a lot of risk factors when it comes to falls that are completely preventable. The only one that I would say is not is that age is a known risk factor for falls. Of course, there's parts of our aging physiology that impact our risk factors for falls. A lot of the other ones are extremely modifiable. But 1, we need to know what they are. 2, we need to know how to measure them. And 3, we need to know what to do about them should we flag that risk. And so this new guideline did a really wonderful job of breaking this all down. So it's called World Guidelines for Falls Prevention and Management for Older Adults, a global initiative. This was a massive undertaking. It went through the literature in a variety of different ways and used a grade scaling. So if you're not familiar with the grade system, it is a measuring system that gives us an idea about the strength of the evidence based on the amount of evidence available, the way that the evidence was done or way the research was done, and the amount of potential bias that could come into the study. So obviously in research, randomized control trials are considered the gold standard. Syntheses with respect to systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and Cochrane analyses are considered the gold standard to get a good idea about trends within the data. And then when we're looking at quality of evidence, when we aren't putting in the necessary steps to make sure that the study was done in a way that doesn't prevent any bias from coming into the study, that knocks down your grading. So When they think about the way that they set this up, the way that I loved it is they talked about using 4 Ps. So predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory. And I think this is a really nice way of thinking about it. So predictive is screening. So the 2 ways that we're going to be able to show up really well in the falls prevention space is to, 1, know the mechanisms that tends to be how older adults fall. In general, in different settings, we now have evidence around mechanisms and kinematics of falls in different settings, ranging from community dwelling older adults to homebound older adults, acute care, long-term care, skilled nursing. So we have this data now. And then we're going to be overwhelmingly curious to ask about the mechanism of falls. The reason why we need to know the general mechanisms that tend to be involved in falling is that there can be a self-report bias or an inability to recall the specific circumstances that led to a person's fall, and it can create a gap in our understanding of where a person's balance is breaking down. So if they can't give us a true narrative history, which sometimes it happens, then the next step is for us to kind of know within the literature base what tend to be the mechanisms for falls so that we can be assessing for those aspects of balance and functional mobility. So predictive is the first one. The second one is preventative, right? So we want to understand what are the risk factors for falls so that we can try to prevent those injuries from happening, right? This is a falls prevention guideline. We are trying to prevent falls. One of the ways that we're going to do that is by knowing what outcome measures to utilize and what those risk factors are. And then the next part is going to be this personalized program. So when we're thinking personalized, we are thinking that there is not a one-size-fits-all falls prevention program. It just doesn't exist. And it's because our older adult population is extremely heterogeneous. And what is going to be the weakest link that is contributing to the highest risk of falls for one older adult is not going to be the thing that is most needed for the next client that you're working in falls prevention for. So, and then the last one, and this one is important, is participatory. Many older adults feel like as they get older, their capacity to accept a certain amount of risk or their perceived control over the amount of risk that they are willing to live with starts to go away. Right? We start saying, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. You could fall. When they say, I understand that I could fall, but I know that risk. I'm thinking of the checks and balances, the risks and rewards, and the reward side is bigger for me, and I want to continue doing that. Right? That type of thing starts to go away. And so the participatory part of this guideline was saying that we need to be collaborating with our clients, right? We have this falls prevention initiative that we know is important. It's leading to so many negative consequences for our older adults. The healthcare utilization expenditure as a consequence of injuries from falls is just astronomical. However, this is a collaborative effort, and we're talking about people's lives here. And so we want to make sure that we're having this conversation with them. So that was kind of the 4 Ps that they talked about as making up the framework for the way that they went about this guideline. And I really loved that because I think we can all kind of get on board on this personalized medicine. And as fitness forward clinicians, we want to be as preventative as possible. So we can get on board with this. So I thought that was really neat. So the next thing that they spoke to is, okay, so how do we get into this screening metric? How do we figure this out? And they framed it off the study. And if you've taken MMOA, Essential Foundations, or Live, we talk about how we really like the study because it gives us a framework and it gives us a communication with our physicians because they get trained on the study. And this is an annual falls screen where they're asking 3 key questions. 1, have you fallen in the past year? 2, do you feel unsteady with walking? And 3, do you worry about falling? And if they answer in the affirmative to any of those 3 questions, then further screening is warranted. So that is where we kind of come into that study framework. And then now let's try and figure out what the risk factors are. So this guideline was extremely comprehensive. I could do an entire hour just talking about this guideline. So we're going to talk about some key points. The falls risk factors that they identified, I'm going to go through this list. It is an exhaustive list. I love it. It's very, very comprehensive. They talk about, here we go, balance, gait, muscle strength, appropriate prescription of walking aids, footwear and foot problems, fear of falling, dizziness and vestibular function, vision, hearing, functional capacity and activities of daily living, cognition, delirium, behavior, orthostatic hypotension, urinary incontinence, cardiovascular disorders and symptoms of cardiovascular disease, other contributing diseases and atypical presentations, neurodegenerative conditions with motor components such as Parkinson's disease, mental health and mood disorders, in particular depression, medication polypharmacy and inappropriate medication prescription, nutrition, vitamin D, and environmental hazards. That is a lot. Those are a lot of things. Now, I'm sure you can think, okay, well, that makes so much sense that there isn't a one size fits all, because that priority list for us, that 1, 2, 3 list, that priority list for our client is going to be very different. But if you go through that list as allied health providers, we can tackle almost all of them. You know, vision and hearing, we can do some screening for, and we can help especially our occupational therapy colleagues that are listening. They have a lot of tools that can be to help with visual aids. Those might be the ones, if we're looking at prescriptions, that we're going to be referring to ophthalmology or referring to audiology or ENT. But a lot of the other ones are definitely in our wheelhouse. And so what we need to be thinking about is we're going to focus kind of in the mobility side, because that's where a lot of us spend a good portion of our time. The next step is making sure that we have the right outcome measures. And they did a great job. Again, they broke this down. So is gait less than 0.8 meters per second of a usual gait speed? Do they have a dual test tug? And is there a big discrepancy between what their timed up and go is and what their dual test tug is? For their balance, if their standing balance is impaired, we best believe that their dynamic and reactive control is impaired. So if indicated, perform a full assessment in a structured manner using tools such as the Berg, Tinetti, and the Mini Best. Consider referral to Allied Health. With muscle strength, using a hand grip JMAR dynamometer as a potential conduit or a test that's going to be an indirect indicator of overall body strength, and see if sarcopenia and clinical levels of muscular weakness are contributing to a person's tripping, right? Because we know that individuals, for example, with severe osteoarthritis in their knees, their main mechanism of falls is because of pain, muscular weakness, feeling like their knee is going to give out, or they're not lifting their leg enough and they have a trip and stumble while walking forward. Walking aids, assess for the appropriateness and use of walking aids and potential mechanical defaults in their gait aids. Fear of falling, we're going to make sure that we know if they have a fear of falling, we can use the falls efficacy scale or the activity specific balance confidence scale. And then we're not going to ignore a person's concerns. We're going to use graded exposure, cognitive behavioral therapy types of techniques, and then allow them to push into that fear and work on their confidence with movements that they find particularly fearful. And so again, this guideline goes through every single one and then gives grades of evidence for what type of assessment they are doing and then what type of intervention. And you bet that their exercise interventions have high grades of evidence when appropriately dosed and progressed and catered, personalized to the person's strengths and weaknesses that is standing in front of you. So when we have guidelines like this, it really helps contribute to our clinical reasoning. It gives us a framework in which we can start to conceptualize how we are going to help and contribute to this falls prevention problem. And then when in collaboration with our older adults and our other members of our healthcare team, we can work on this multifactorial intervention to really give our older adults who want to work on this balance issue, want to work on preventing falls as much as possible, the best fighting chance in order to see true change based on the risk factors that you've identified, and hopefully in a preventative landscape where we are getting people into our networks before they've had 15 falls and they finally have an injury as a consequence. We want to get them in early when these risk factors are starting to pop up, and having frameworks like this that stratify risk and allow us to have an algorithm to speak with other members of our healthcare team is extremely important and beneficial. All right. If you are interested, I can post the DOI for that study. It is open access. It is available to you. So I encourage you to take a look. Otherwise, I hope that I will see you guys on the road in either Oshkosh with Alex or in St. Mary's with me. Hopefully make your thoughts with me that all of a sudden there isn't a hurricane and something happens in Georgia. I think we're going to be good, but we're going to cross our fingers. Hopefully you all have a good start to your week. It's already hump day, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.